All right, so who is really pulling the strings at Manchester United these days, one of the biggest football clubs in the world? And can they get back to the top of world football? They're back in the Champions League for the first time in 3 years, but they're also about to make a very important decision, appointing a brand new head coach. If they get it right, it could be the start of a new era, but if they get it wrong, it could risk setting the club back again on the pitch with millions of fans watching and off the field with a debt pile that never seems to get any smaller. Let's follow the money and find out who really runs Manchester United.
And now it's time. It's time. It's time for Moneyball. Moneyball. Are you familiar with the story of Moneyball?
Hey team, welcome to Moneyball, the business of sport, because if you want to know what's really going on in sport, you gotta follow the money. I'm your host, Scott Keenan, and I've got a feeling you are going to be popping off in the comments big time on this one because Manchester United has such a huge following all over the world. I'm a fan, I've got family and friends that are too. Comment away and tell me what you think about the owners, the Glazers, INEOS, and the current state of the club. And who do you think is best to take Manchester United into the future? Because after years at the top under Sir Alex Ferguson, the club has spent well over a decade now trying to find its way back, and it has been a really tough ride, a roller coaster, up and down. And it hasn't just been a football problem, because off the pitch, the numbers are just as complex. Manchester United are carrying more than £1 billion of debt and obligations once you factor in loans and transfer fees that they owe to other clubs. At the same time, Champions League football is worth between £80 million and £120 million a year, depending on how far they go in the competition. And structurally, the ownership is still split. The Glazer family, they remain the majority owners with over 50% of the shares, while INEOS, which is the company owned by Sir Jim Ratcliffe, control the football side, but not full financial ownership. So the money, the ownership and the ambitions haven't really been lined up for quite some time. But could things be changing under this new arrangement with INEOS in charge of the football side of things? I want to bring in Chris Blackhurst, who is well positioned to talk to us about this today. He's an accomplished journalist and commentator, former editor of The Independent in the UK, and the author of a definitive book about the ownership of Manchester United and the transformation of the club into one of the world's most powerful financial assets. Chris, thanks for joining me. It's been more than 2 years now since Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS bought into United. They promised to fix things. But I want to ask you, is Manchester United actually being run any differently today to what it was before they came in? Or is it still fundamentally the thing that you wrote about a couple of years ago, a cash machine, or as we like to call it here in Australia, an ATM pumping out money for its owners, but just with new people making the decisions?
I would say in answer to that question, I'm not fudging it, but this is my answer. I'd say it's a bit of both. It's being operated on tighter financial lines. One argument is, have they really made a difference? And by that, I mean, Jim Ratcliffe came in as the big I am, very rich guy, one stage, the richest man in the UK, made a fortune in the chemicals industry. And he did what quite a lot of business people do, successful business people, which is they think they can apply the way they run their business and what's worked for them in business to football. And football isn't quite like that. He took out the easy stuff, and some of it was pretty brutal. He cut costs. He got rid of long-serving backroom employees, which didn't go down well. He looked at the ticket prices. He did all those things. But in the end, what defines a football club, and certainly a football club like Manchester United, possibly not the football club I support, but the expectation, the sense of entitlement, and what defines that club is success on the pitch.
Yep.
And so far, they have not achieved that. They might achieve it this season. Well, they're in the Champions League for next season, which is a huge step for them. They've been out of it for a long time.
And it's where the money is too, right? It's between 80 and 120 million pounds that comes into the club, depending on where they go in that competition next year.
And it's worth a lot of money in terms of advertising, sponsorship, the TV audience. It covers the whole of Europe, but it's also watched by the rest of the world. You know, let's face it, no offense to Burnley fans, but you're not you're not playing Burnley, you're playing
Barcelona.
PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. And and that's where United see themselves. So that is a big gain, but it still feels a bit unknown, a bit fragile. It still has the ability to go horribly wrong.
What I do want to ask you about, though, is where the power sits, do you think? Because you've got the Glazers owning more than half of the shares in the club. INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe are somewhere between 27 and 29%, and the rest is on the New York Stock Exchange. INEOS and Ratcliffe are in charge of making decisions about what happens on the field, and it's what all of the fans care about.
Yeah.
But where do you think the real decision-making sits? Is he, I know he's not just the front man, but is he the front man who makes the decisions, or is he doing it in consultation, close consultation, do you think, with the Glazers? Would they, knowing what you know about the Glazers, would they be happy that he is taking the reins?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends on what those decisions are. It is a very strange deal. I mean, here you've got a man, unquestionably a business success, created INEOS in his own image, very private company, very big company. That's his very large chemicals business. What Jim says at INEOS, that's what happens. He's the boss, no question. There's absolutely no question. For some reason, he buys Manchester United, but the bit he doesn't get is the votes, and he does not have any votes. He doesn't have, the power in that business lies still, and it is a business, lies still with the Glazers. Day-to-day decisions, yes, they can take those, but he could get a phone call tomorrow, from the Glazers saying, Jim, you know what? We've decided to sell. He could have nothing to do with that at all.
And who it's sold to.
Or who they sell to. Nothing to do with him, Gov, because he's not the Gov. I mean, he's not. And he's got no power. And that's a very strange it's quite hard to get your head round. For a man like Ratcliffe to play second fiddle seems a bit weird. As to where they sit with, say, changing the manager, because that's the next big decision for a football. I mean, the big decisions for football clubs are the ground, new stadium. These are big capital things. Although they've taken one decision there to try and build it, to get the go ahead for a new stadium. I don't think they've got the money.
No, they don't.
And then the other decision is really the manager. And then obviously the way of modern football, the big transfers. These are the big outlays. They're what define the modern football club, the successful football club. Well, on those three areas, as well as ownership, it's up to them. As far as I can see, I mean, I've read the agreement with Ratcliffe. It's publicly available. It's a bit mind-boggling, but it's there if anyone has the patience to read it. And it makes it clear. I mean, they have the power.
And it's really interesting because that, as a Manchester United fan and somebody who watches the story as it's unfolded over the last couple of years with INEOS coming in, that's not the story that Jim Ratcliffe has wanted to tell, and he's wanted to take steps and to take control on the football side of things. But let's go back and go down memory lane a little bit. Let's delve into what your book is about and go back to 2005 and the leveraged takeover of Manchester United by the Glazer family. They loaded the club up with debt as part of the deal. And they've taken many dividends over the years. I think interest, as we know from your book, over £750 million and counting, has been accrued and cost the club over that time too. There's lots of consequences of this deal. But in your opinion, what do you think has been the biggest consequence of that model that has been put in place with the ownership there and that leveraged buyout?
One word, and I'd say unhappiness. Unhappiness for the fans, the supporters, and I don't just mean the fans who go to Old Trafford, but the global audience, because they have a global audience. And that unhappiness is represented by lack of success on the pitch. some of the fans hearing that would say, and having heard what you said as well, they would say, yeah, but that's because they loaded the club up with debt. They did load the club up with debt, but they still got some of the world's biggest managers. They still got some of the world's biggest players. They still spent a fortune on those things. And one of the successes of the Glazers, which is in the book, is that they turned a football club into a marketing machine.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a colossus in terms of the way it markets itself. It sets a new standard. Tell a story about how marketing directors around the world in big brands were suddenly sent boxes one day, and they opened the box and there was a replica shirt. Marketing directors aren't known for being particularly slim. They like they like lots of eating and dining and whining, and so they're all in Excel, and they had their name on the back. So instead of Wayne Rooney or Ryan Giggs, it said whoever it was, John
Joe
Smith,
Blogs.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the brand on the front or the brand on the back, and then they'd even sent pictures of this shirt and saying, and they put it on CGI and said, you could be playing for Manchester United. Incredibly smart. They got loads of deals from this, from the most, I mean, it's in the book, the most unlikely list of sponsors.
Aeroflot in Russia. I mean,
they had Aeroflot, they had an Argentinian winemaker, they had people queuing up, everything, people piling in, all sorts of companies.
Yeah, and look, I think there's no doubt they've been brilliant at generating cash. And I mean, that's in the title of your book, right? But unhappiness, why do you think fans are unhappy? What's the kernel of the thing that makes fans unhappy?
Two reasons. One is lack of success on the pitch. Success in any sport, in anything, in any walk of life, is only temporary. But
it's
because
earned, it's not owned.
Yeah, exactly. Because they had it for so long under Alex Ferguson, they felt that was their birthright. Now, there are fans who go back much further when Manchester United were not so successful. But the other thing about the unhappiness is something of the spirit of the club was lost. One of the things that encapsulates Manchester United as opposed to other clubs, there is this legend. And one of the reasons people flocked to them was, the whole story of the Munich air crash, the destruction of the team. It was terrible. The rebuilding, the winning of the European Cup, the glamour of George Best and Bobby Charlton. I suppose the current equivalent would be Barcelona or Real Madrid, but they kept it up for a long time. And they went through a fallow period. Then Ferguson came along with the class of 92, David Beckham, Ryan Giggs, Gary Neville, etc., won everything there was to win, kept on winning. And the spirit stayed, and it was glory, glory. Well, the song they sing is Glory, Glory, Man United. Every club that has a successful manager, and Manchester City might be about to have the same problem if Pep Guardiola leaves. How do you replace them? United had a rapid succession of managers. People didn't know whether they were coming or going. And the club, that spirit started to erode. And then the final thing I'd say, if you drill down with the fans, and I mean the fan groups, and I spoke to the main ones, I spoke to the ones who do the protests against the Glazers and Jim Ratcliffe, although they've died down. I mean, the interesting thing is they've died down a bit now. But if you drill down and say, what is it that you don't like? What's missing? And they actually more than once use the same word. Again, it's a soppy word for football. It was love. They felt that the owners did not love the club. They wanted them to be visible at the club, even in the bad times.
Yeah.
When they lost, they wanted them to be sitting in the stands with the supporters, experiencing what they're experiencing and the good times. And the Glazers, if Glazers had one fault, it was that they were invisible.
That's the exact word that just came to my mind. I thought the same thing.
They were 3,500 miles away in the States. They came once. Now, the argument that they use as for their not going is because they feared for their own safety. The reason the fans got wound up was because they weren't going, and the fans
Yeah,
got more wound up because they weren't going. So yes,
I don't cop that. I think that's a really poor argument, and I think
I
you know,
think
you
it
look
is.
at Ed Sheeran at Ipswich, look at Ryan Reynolds at Wrexham, owners
Yeah,
that invest in their
or
clubs, that go to their clubs.
even. I mean, the one that sticks in the mind as well is when he owned Chelsea. Um, Roman
Roman Abramovich.
Abramovich
Yeah,
is a very private figure. Roman Abramovich is not somebody who courts publicity. People like me like to use this word, but he's shadowy. He operates in the shadows. But when it came to owning a football club, he was there. He was visible to the fans. He was okay. He had his own box, but he's allowed that. He's got his security and things. That's fair enough. But he was there, and he would also go into the changing room. He'd turn up at the training ground. When you talk to the fans, that's the thing that they come back to time and again: the lack of love.
yeah, and I think then it leads people to ask, well, why are they invested in the club? Why have they loaded it up with debt? Why are
Well,
they owners?
if I can interrupt you, then what? Yes, they do ask that question, and of course, what that makes them think, and they might well be right, is what motivates them purely is the money.
Yeah.
Now, the Glazers and their people, they say, Chris, it's not like that. If you go to Malcolm Glazer's office, Malcolm Glazer's house, you will see a shrine to Manchester United. Well, in which case, let us see it.
Yeah,
Because that's the other thing.
I believe you
They
weren't
don't give
you
interviews.
weren't able to see it as part of your
No,
investigations for the book.
I was told that they would see me. I made the mistake that other people in my position make of thinking, "Hey, I'm the one. I'm going to be the one that gets the big interview. It's going to be me." And because my ego says, right, they're going to see me, but I got a call saying, Chris, he can't see you. He's too busy.
I think the whole thing's strange, right? Because they own a shrine to United. It's called Old Trafford, and they can go there anytime, right?
I mean, that's exactly right. And even if they do have, and let's give them due and say, I believe you. You do have a shrine to Manchester United in
Show
Florida.
us.
Well, even if you showed us, I still say you need to be at the ground.
I totally agree. Can I just really quickly, can we just go to the debt issue? Because this comes up a lot. And I just want to break this down a little bit. They currently carry around £1.3 billion in total debt and liabilities. It includes the legacy debt, which we've talked about, a credit facility, which they have. And now they've got more than $400 million in transfer fees that they still have owed to other clubs. So it's a lot of money to be carrying. Of course, it generates a lot of cash too. But a simple question, how much does that debt, do you think, actually limit what they can do, not just in transfers, but in infrastructure for new stadiums, for the academies, for training grounds, women's team? Does it limit what they're able to do?
Only to an extent. The fans, not just fans, commentators get very exercised by the level of debt. As long as they keep paying the interest,
Yeah.
and meeting the interest payments, it's fine.
And I think the argument that a lot of people have is that money that gets accrued in interest and the payments that have to be made on the debt is money that doesn't go into something else. And I think that's part of the challenge that a lot of fans have.
I think that is a fair comment. And I think you put your finger on it as well when you raise the issue of the funding of a new stadium, because that is a different beast.
Yeah.
That is a capital project. And we're talking a huge amount of money there. It would be a lot easier for them to build that stadium if they didn't have the debt. Transfers as a marketplace, they can buy and sell, they can sell players. That's less of an issue. And the sums of money are not that as big. There's no question United would be a better club without it. I mean, but then look at it this way. Imagine they didn't have the debt, and imagine they still didn't have success on the pitch. What would be happening then? I can tell you what would be happening. The fans would be people would be screaming at them to say, borrow money, so you can get better players, the best manager. It swings and roundabouts.
It is, and one of the swings is that they've been bad sellers over the last 10, 15 years as a club. They've spent a lot of money bringing players in, but they've made very little on players that they've sent out, which has been a huge problem. And INEOS has now come in, and let's just talk about them for a sec, because they promised that best in class was what they wanted to have across the football department. And they've brought people in and they've already sacked people. Ruben Amorim is one, and we'll get to him in a sec. But they've, as you said at the start, they've cut staff, they've increased ticket prices, they've openly talked about the financial strain that the club is under. So you've got cost cutting on one hand, and you've got this clear ambition on the other, wanting to win a Premier League title by 2028. Do you think those two things can coexist, or do you think, are they getting the club maybe into a better shape to start to challenge and start to be in order for a better future?
Certain aspects of the club have been put on a better footing. They've improved the training ground. In terms of success on the pitch, it is extremely fragile. Technically right now, they don't have a permanent manager.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure now on them to appoint Michael Carrick. I suspect they will. He's got them into the Champions League. He's popular. He's local. I mean, he's a United person. They've had this revolving door of managers and players all the time. And one of the lessons that I would say that was not heeded by the Glazers and by the successive regimes, and it's not just the managers, there's also the chief executive and the hierarchy. Well, they forget. Let's look at Alex Ferguson. Alex Ferguson nearly lost his job. I mean, I'm trying to remember who they were playing. I have a feeling it was Oxford in the cup or something. He was very close to losing. I mean, his first period as manager was diabolical.
3 years, I think.
The fans were chanting "Fergie out, Fergie out." He put faith in a group of kids, and there's a very famous, quip from an English football commentator, Alan Hansen, who famously said, "You don't win anything with kids," and he condemned Ferguson for putting on the pitch in the United colours a group of youngsters. Well, that group of youngsters delivered every trophy, and went on to be some of the game's greatest players. That was started with those kids in their academy, and that aspect of the way football success can be achieved was lost.
And they've got this great record, haven't they, of having an academy player in the first team squad going back many, many years.
But
bringing those players through since the sort of the mid '90s, it's they sort of went away from that and started bringing in the big Galacticos, right?
Yes, exactly. And the problem with Galacticos is they owe you no loyalty. They're probably coming to you because their agent says they should. They've got a good price. It's nothing to do with, hey, I'm a Manchester United player. It's in my DNA. The other aspect, though, of building success from an academy takes time. And there's no guarantee. I mean, and this quick fix of buying in star names, that has gone right across top football. Well, there are only so many good players to go round for a start. They have to bond. They have to gel. They have to play to the manager's way. Then the manager gets the sack. And then the new guy comes in. He wants new players, a new way of playing, and it's a nightmare. And I mean, the most telling thing of all is that, and this is true in business. It's not just true in football. The businesses that succeed, the organizations that succeed are usually the ones where you can point to a chief executive, a boss who's been there a long time.
And who do you see as that key figure then at United? Is it Omar Barada, who is the chief executive, or is it Jim Ratcliffe? Is it the head coach? Who do you think is that central person?
I think it is a combination of Barada and Ratcliffe, but I think ultimately, actually, it is Ratcliffe. I think he wants a manager that he can put his faith in. He wants a manager who can deliver success. and he wants a manager who can play the United way. And when you go to Old Trafford, one of the chants you always hear is attack, attack, attack. That's what they want. They want their team surging from the back, surging forward. I mean, look, there's no finer sight in football. And when they're going attack, 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 and it's all out, the nerves are tingling. It's great to watch.
My bugbear is that people complain about, how things went last time when the club appointed a former player under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I actually think they played some of their best football since Sir Alex Ferguson under Ole. It was, yes, it was counter-attacking, but it was fast, it was flowing, they were pinging the ball around, and they were scoring goals left, right and centre. And we've seen Carrick come in. The striker Mateus Cunha said this week that he thinks he's brought this kind of magic dust that Sir Alex Ferguson liked, that he's got this way with the players.
Yeah.
And maybe that is because he's been in that dressing room. He's played in the Champions League final. He knows what it's like to play at Old Trafford.
Solskjaer had a very good win record. He was good. I can't remember now. I think Carrick might now be better, but
it's very similar, yeah.
Now, Solskjaer was totally smitten with Sir Alex Ferguson. I would be hoping and saying to Carrick, you got to shape this club in your own image.
Yeah.
And one of the problems United has, and it's a nice problem, and don't get me wrong, but, every time something goes wrong on the pitch, what do? They cut to Alex Ferguson, who's sitting in the stand. He's like this godfather figure. And, it can haunt the club. And I'm not saying Sir Alex shouldn't be there, but they need to move on from Sir Alex. And it cuts both ways. You've got the managers, the foreign managers who come in like Mourinho, like Ruben Amorim, where they don't have the Sir Alex baggage. And then you've got the former players like Solskjaer and Carrick who do. And they need to move on. I mean, there's a very funny story that is often told. Solskjaer wouldn't park his car in the parking space that said manager, because that was Sir Alex's space.
True.
Well, Ollie, he's retired. He's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, look, I think there's a mix of like respect and an ability to move on, and I take your point very much, but also think, Ruben Amorim was appointed by Jim Ratcliffe, by this new ownership, and they picked the wrong horse. For me, attack is not let's play five at the back and try and work our way up the field. That's not the United way, and I think Carrick has shown that instead of putting square pegs in round holes like Amorim did for 2.5 years or for 2 years or whatever it was, that if you play the players that you've got in the positions that they're best suited to, you're going to go much better. And what I wanted to ask you about Carrick specifically was the question of risk. A lot of people talk about it being a risk if Carrick is appointed, that they should go for a proven Champions League winning manager from overseas, from some other club that they can bring in. It can cut both ways. You stick with Carrick, you could get it wrong, or you bring in someone else. It's another reset, it goes wrong. But what do you think is the big risk now for Ratcliffe and for the Glazers, financially particularly, if they get this wrong?
If they get this wrong, well, the risk is getting it wrong on the pitch. The risk is, yes, they've qualified for the Champions League, but then they go out in the early stages, and at the same time, their Premiership form slumps as well, and they're sort of back to where they were. And then people will say, well, you should never have appointed him. But I would say right now, the upheaval would be enormous. He's clearly getting the best out of the spine of the team. I like it. He's not making a big show. There seems to be method. I'm seeing method. And I don't think in previous managers at United I've seen method.
He's got a platform to build from. He's assured. And I think if you bring someone in and shake it all up again, it could all fall down and they could be back where they started, at the Ten Hag era.
Another key thing now is that if you are a top player, if Manchester United come calling now, you're more likely to be interested and say yes. There was a period not long ago, very recently, where they were not getting the best players. The best players were going to PSG or Barcelona or Real Madrid or Chelsea, wherever. That might well have changed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players in the last couple of years, last sort of 2, 3, 4 years that have gone to City and Liverpool that were also being courted by United, and
Yeah.
they just weren't in with a hope on any of those players. And you can see with the types of players that they signed last summer, they were proven Premier League players, but they weren't big stars, and they fitted in well, and they've done a good job this season. But they're not the top stars, and I think now being back in the Champions League next season, and hopefully an assured coach at the helm, they can start to attract some of those players too, and hopefully keep bringing through those younger players too in the academies.
The other problem with Manchester United that we've not touched upon, and this is unbelievable, really, when United seem to have spawned an old boy cadre of commentators and pundits, former players who make huge livings attacking Manchester United. News platforms, sports platforms, they will have lead stories which will be a former player of Manchester United being rude about the current setup.
Yeah, Rio Ferdinand says, Gary Neville says.
Rio Ferdinand, Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, it goes on and on and on. These commentators only get the hits if they say something controversial. If they say, I think Michael Carrick's great, well, you're not going to click on that.
No.
Well, you shrug. They get it more than any other club.
100%. Mate, to wrap up, I just want to ask you one question about the future. So you've looked into the past, you've looked at the ownership model of the club and the finances under the Glazers and now INEOS too. If the club had to choose over the next 5 years, investing in a world-class stadium or in a world-class squad, what do you think that they would choose? What takes priority, and what do you reckon that tells us about the ownership model that we have right now?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I'm going to be very quick in my answer. There is nothing wrong with Old Trafford. Now, there may be fans watching, listening to this who say, you're kidding, the roof leaks. It was one little leak in the part of the ground. You try coming to Craven Cottage where I go, I sit on wooden seats.
Wow.
And there's no leg room. And I'm quite happy. Why am I happy? Because I'm watching my team on the pitch.
Yeah.
And sometimes Fulham even win, which is nice. And the squad success on the pitch comes first. Old Trafford is a world-class stadium.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a bit old, it's a bit tired. It can be modernised. There's bits that need improving, but it's holding 74,000, one of the biggest in the world. Yeah, it's tatty, but hey, you know what? It's Old Trafford.
Yeah.
And it's got statues, and it's got the Ferguson stand and the Bobby Charlton stand, and it's where Best and Charlton and David Beckham and Wayne Rooney and all those players played. They didn't play at a new stadium, they played there. It's really about holding stadium concerts for Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, and making money out of that, as it is. And Jim Ratcliffe will say you're wrong, but that's the only way the figures stack up. Don't also say that a sports stadium is of economic benefit and generates new jobs and transforms an area. There is not one scintilla of evidence that statement is correct. Show me somewhere in the world where a football stadium or a sports stadium or a tennis stadium, a cricket ground has transformed the local area, because I make this point. They lie empty most of the time. And so, by the way, do all the businesses that serve them. So yes, they've got cafes, wine bars, pubs, shops, but they're serving them on match days.
Yeah.
I could take you down the road here to Chelsea, to Stamford Bridge. There's no one there.
Yeah. I can tell you, Gary Neville is cooking up plans for how he can help to grow the economic activity around Old Trafford. I can tell you that much. He's a very clever businessman, always trying to work out what he can get his fingers into. But I will take it then that you're saying that the club probably should be investing in the squad over the stadium at this point in time.
I would do two things quickly.
Yeah.
I'd invest in the squad. I'd also invest in Old Trafford. Okay, if you want a new stadium, keep the idea going, but they must come first. Get the success on the pitch. Get them back, United back to where it was. If that can be achieved, it's a miracle. But miracles do happen.
Thank you very much for joining me. Your book is fantastic. Still available for sale. It is The World's Biggest Cash Machine, Manchester United, the Glazers, and the Struggle for Football's Soul. Chris Blackhurst, former editor of The Independent and a legend here on Moneyball, mate. Thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Moneyball.
Yes, well, there's no business of sport without the fans, and so let's hope that the owners start getting it right for the sake of the fans more than they get it wrong. Because it is a divisive topic, and so many Manchester United fans feel pretty strongly about the club's ownership. There's been protests, which we didn't even really touch on in that conversation, but for a long time over the ownership stake that the Glazer family has, it's been anything but a smooth ride. But this club has become the biggest ATM in the world. It is a commercial beast in spite of the difficult years since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. The club keeps printing money. But they can only live off the past for so long and the loyalty of fans for so long. That's why they need to invest correctly in the right people, the right players, and the pathways from the academy up to the first team to make sure that the club can be a success into the future as well. And in my opinion, unless a genuinely world-class alternative comes along, I believe Michael Carrick can be the man to take the club forward into the next season as the head coach at Manchester United. Let me know in the comments who you think should be the next coach of Manchester United. And do you reckon the club is on a better footing since the INEOS investment a couple of years ago? If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe for more breakdowns of business in sport. You can follow the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode if you're listening. And you can ask me a question anytime. Just email the show, askmoneyball.show@gmail.com. And remember, if you want to know what is really going on in sport, you got to follow the money. I'll see you next time.